The dream of building digital products is now well within reach of most businesses. What's more difficult is to create products that sell. Too often, the idea sounds marvelous, but the customer reaction is meh. I'm Jane Singer, and welcome back to A Seat at the Table. Each week, we sit down with leaders, innovators, and entrepreneurs to get ideas and learn best practices that will help elevate our businesses. Today, we're joined by Tobi Ogunmoyero, a certified Scrum Product Owner who helps organizations turn complex ideas into products customers value. He's developed large-scale platforms across finance, public services, and early-stage technology ventures, and leads product vision and roadmaps at Sleekabyte Technologies. In this podcast, he'll be talking about early signs of product debt, how to lower overheads, and what metrics we need to watch when managing product debt. Before we get started, if you're an apparel industry exec who's looking for the next growth market, then you might want to check out Inside Fashion. Each month, Inside Fashion gives you a comprehensive yet concise view of where today's growth opportunities are. From geographic markets to product categories, you'll find new blue oceans where margins are better and demand is on the uptick. To find out more, go to InsideFashionLive.net. I'll also leave a link in the show notes. Now let's sit down with Tobi and find out how to get rid of product debt and start to grow our business.
And one of the reasons why I chose this topic is it's something that I've found in almost every organization I've worked in, and almost every project that I've worked in, it comes up because, as you would appreciate, the agile methodology, Scrum, and all that stuff, I mean, it's old, but I would like to say it's pretty new to product delivery. People are used to the traditional project management approach to things, where there's a big guy at the top and everybody just has to do what that guy wants. The risk of that is that users and the actual consumers of that product that you are building are usually an afterthought. And what that means is you invest a lot of money upfront, and at the end, you risk getting something that people may not use or not want at all, which is why I thought this topic is a really good one to talk about, which is product debt essentially. So it's an interesting one. And as well, people are used to technical debt as everybody knows what technical debt is, but I think very few people actually talk about product debt, which leans towards strategy more than delivery.
So what exactly is product debt?
Yeah, that's a great place to start. Most people are familiar with the idea of technical debt, like I said earlier. And technical debt essentially means when the team takes shortcuts in code or architecture and they deliver something really quickly, but over time, those shortcuts slow down the system, whereas product debt is a bit different. So product debt is a build-up of poor product decisions that have been made by product leaders, often with good intention in mind, but they tend to add a lot of clutter and complexity, and they don't deliver value to customers. An analogy I like to use is a house analogy, right? Technical debt is like using cheap wiring during construction. The house works, but eventually lights flicker and the circuit strip. But product debt, on the other hand, is when you decide to add 3 extra rooms that nobody has asked for. So both add cost and risk, right? But one frustrates builders and the other one frustrates people who actually live in the house, right? So just to keep it short and sweet, technical debt slows developers down, while product debt slows growth.
That's a really interesting point of view. And I actually agree with you. As someone who's quite interested in technology myself, although I don't certainly have the expertise that you do, I think it's interesting. As you say, technical debt is really using less good on the developing side of things, the coding side of things, right? The perhaps even some of the physical side of the product. And then the actual product debt is, in a sense, providing too many features, right? Becoming what we call a feature factory, where you just keep adding stuff on, right? You're sort of feeding the front end marketing machine, so they always have the next press release, and yet it doesn't serve the customer, right? It confuses the customer oftentimes, and then you don't have enough on the back end to support the development of that, right? To keep debugging and to keep it up to date. So it's really good you brought that up. It's actually a very, very big problem.
Yeah, it's a major problem. I mean, and I can give you an example. I was on a project, and we audited the product, and we found about 50 features that were available to users, but only about 5% of those were actually used. by the users. And I think these audits are important because these things add extra surface area and make the product harder to learn, just like you have said yourself. It slows down development if you think about it, because you will spend more time maintaining those features that people don't actually use than actually building stuff that would be useful to users. So
Yeah.
yeah, simplicity is key. You need to simplify user journeys, make things simple, declutter, remove low value features, and you can improve adoption for your product by just doing something that's simple.
Very good points. Now you talk about how leaders can spot, right, product debt. In other words, what are some of the early warning signs? Because sometimes when you're working on a project, you're so involved in developing the next thing and you get excited about it. What are some of the signs that people at a leadership level need to start looking for?
So that's actually a trick. The tricky thing about product debt, right, is that it doesn't show up on your balance sheet, right? So it creeps in very quietly, and the symptoms are, I mean, leaders are often see the symptoms before they actually have given it a name, right? And one of the key signs is customer feedback starts to shift, right? So instead of celebrating new features, your customers are confused and they are frustrated by the product, right? Another one is when your roadmap looks really busy. I don't know if you've seen that anywhere before, but adoption rates are very flat, right? So when you check adoption rates, it's flat. People usually don't use the features, or there's really low use of those features, and you've got a backlog full of ideas that never move forward. Another big one is when your team spend more time maintaining existing features rather than building new ones, which I have mentioned previously. And that's often product debt weighing them down. It's a bit like carrying a backpack on a hike, right? I mean, at first it looks manageable. Then when you keep adding more stuff, then it starts to weigh you down and slow you down. Yeah, and organizations get slowed down without realizing why. And this is essentially why that happens. So long and short is, if customers are not complaining, are not celebrating, and they're always complaining about features, then there's a lot of product there in there that you need to go in, carry out an audit and find out what exactly the low value features are, so you can declutter.
Yes, that's such a good point. And, I'm listening to what you're saying, and I'm thinking this really applies to all industries, not just tech, right? We get so involved in ideating, right? Coming up with all these creative ideas, and nobody's worrying about executing. And, it seems like the top end of the value chain is the ideas. But actually, as you know, and what you're saying here is when you look at it, if you can't execute on it, or you can't execute on it successfully, then you really don't have anything, essentially, other than things that sound good, but that nobody's buying.
Exactly. So AI is really a trendy topic right now.
Yes.
Product leaders are looking for use cases for AI. There's a temptation to try to build something with AI just for the sake of saying, I have an AI feature on my product, and without actually thinking about, do users really need this feature? Will people actually use this? Is this useful to anyone? Or am I just jumping on the AI bandwagon? So I think this is where user research becomes really important. I'm a big fan of rapid iteration at the design phase of software development, right? So build your prototype, test it with actual users, get feedback from them, let them tell you if those features are actually useful to them, and then you can commit to building those with your engineering team. And then you are sure you are actually building something people want, and you're not just building something that your CTO told you to build because he wants an AI feature on his roadmap.
That's so true. I mean, it seems to me like when the internet started to become really big, like around the year 2000, roughly, and everything had to have a .com, right? Everybody was going to be a .com company, regardless of whether what they were doing actually really made sense, at least at that point in time, for taking that direction. But everybody sort of jumped on it, and now it seems like you're saying every product that rolls out has that little bit of AI fairy dust sprinkled on it. And you're right, the features aren't well developed, they don't work properly, the user is frustrated, it just ends up being bad all around. But you can't hold people back, right, from feeling that they got to get on that train.
Yeah, and in terms of slowing development down, developers would actually spend, or the Scrum team, you might not have the luxury of having multiple teams. You might have a few teams working on stuff, and you are making your Scrum team to commit to building a feature that has not really been thought out, has not been tested with actual users, and then you build that feature. You have to maintain that feature that you've now just built, and users would not need. And there's this fear of taking away features that are useless. Yeah, so we have to keep it going. We have to keep maintaining it. We have to find a way to. I mean, you can't force users to use a feature that they don't want. If it's for internal users within your organization, then they might use it. But if it's for clients and customers, then that have options, they will just go elsewhere. So you invested resource in building something that people would not use. And so thinking about the marketing team, for instance, now, if you are thinking about conversion rates, so those are leads that you've now lost because you've added too many steps in your user journey.
We're going to take a quick break now, and then we'll be right back.
We were hiring when we were making 50 to 100K monthly losses.
And why? Welcome to episode 1.
I can't think of a single founder who's been around for a decent amount of time in business who hasn't had their tunnel of year. This was that year. We're going to be okay, yeah, Sheree. Some are going to hear this and think, you TDP. But hear me out. You only have to do the math to understand that very soon we were $500,000 down.
Yeah, that's so true. Now, how can leaders in a practical way and in lower cost possible, lower overhead way, reduce product debt so that they can accelerate delivery?
So reducing product debt doesn't always mean launching a new initiative, right? Some of the most effective approaches, like low overhead, and they can be woven into the way a team really works already. So I'll give you 3 practical steps to this. So delivering value isn't just asking, are customers using this, right? And does it align with our outcomes, right? One of the ways you can actually reduce product debt is to use OKRs, right? And the reason why I love OKRs is because they're outcome based, right? And they force you to think about the why. Why are we building this?
Can you just let us know what OKRs are for people listening who might not know that?
Oh, yeah. So when I say OKRs mean objectives and key results.
Okay,
right?
Great. Objectives
and key results. Framework. So that's what it means. It's a simple framework for setting a big picture goal. So basically, what are the objectives? And you need to have like 2 or 3 measurable outcomes for those, which are the key results. And what that just tells you is, are we making progress? It's a simple way of saying, here's the outcome that we are aiming for, and here's how we are going to track that, right?
Okay, perfect.
And when the team aligns around that, it becomes easier to track low value work. Is essentially what I meant by that. I hope that clarifies what that means. Right. So back to the point. So 3 points are, one regular product health checks, right? Like I said previously, it's almost like retros, but it's not retrospective. It's sort of an audit, where you take a step back and you analyze your features. Are users engaging with them? How often do people use them? And then you get rid of the low value ones. I've mentioned using OKRs as one of the points. And I'll also mention that you should not be afraid to remove sunset features. So feature maintenance comes at a cost, right? So if it's not adding value, then it's adding debt. So just get rid of the feature if it's not serving any useful purpose to users. And the analogy I like to use, again, that I've used previously, is like it's like decluttering your home, right? How you tend to like take a lot of stuff in, you buy stuff that you really don't need, and at some point there's literally no space for any more stuff. So you need to take a step back and declutter, get rid of the things that you don't need, and then you're left with things that are actually useful to you.
I like the fact that you pointed that out, because I think that, on the one side, as you're pointing out, you don't want to overdevelop on the features, right? You don't want to become a feature creature. But on the other hand, you have to know when something needs to be, as you're saying, decluttered. and sunset things that nobody uses anymore, that don't really align with some of the technology that's already replacing it. So it's too easy, right, for people to, sort of become in love with legacy features and not want to get rid of them when it's sometimes, holding them back.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. And I've seen that happen so many times. People love, and I don't blame the team because you've invested time and effort into building this feature, and you sort of fall in love with it. But I mean, you have to make a decision as a product leader to get rid of features that you don't need and make the journey much seamless for users. So most times it's not about building something brand new. Sometimes it's about looking at the user journey and just identifying steps that no longer serve any purpose and just removing those. Yeah. And I can give you an example if you like.
Yes, please.
Of where I've seen this happen. Oh, okay. So I was working on a project, one of the products that I managed where I worked previously. The users would need to use two separate tools for research, and these are related products. The problem was that cross-selling wasn't happening, so advisors were not telling the clients about protection services or mortgages, and that's because they had to carry out research on one platform and go out of that platform to carry out protection research in another platform. And the solution was really simple. A simple checkbox at the start of the journey that lets them tell us if they wanted a protection as well while talking to them about the mortgage, solve that problem. So that's simple as that. So low maintenance, really straightforward. You tick a box, you tell us if you want to perform, if you want a protection quote alongside your mortgage, and that was it. And that solved that problem. So by removing that extra high maintenance feature that was a standalone item that users had to come out and interact with, it improved cross-selling. It made its life easier for users and made things a lot straightforward. So it's a clear case of reducing product debt by simplifying and not building more.
I'm just curious, now that AI has made it so much easier to build apps and to be able to code things, right? You now have, basically no coding options, things that it's very, very easy to get things started on many different kinds of projects, more so than ever before. Do you think that's almost a negative because everyone feels they can just add everything, and so it's becoming a bit bloated on the development side as opposed to before where you had to actually hire developers, you needed a lot more resources, so you had to think a lot more carefully about whether something was worth doing, whereas now, and I'm explaining this a bit unelegantly, people are just grabbing everything and throwing it at the market and thinking, okay, some of it maybe will stick. So you have a tremendous amount of not very good apps and tools that are coming. That's just my point of view. And I mean, obviously you might say differently.
You are absolutely, so you are correct. I like to see AI as a tool rather than a problem. And it's a fantastic tool for a product leader like myself. I think where product leadership, product strategy comes in is when you know how to use AI for good. So for instance, what you referenced there with no-code tools that are out there that you can use to quickly get a live working version of your product idea. How you can use that is within seconds, you can have a live web app, well, not a live, but a prototype that users can interact with. And you can put that quickly in front of users and test that today, and you can get feedback very quickly. So, but I think I'm a strong believer the need for developers still. So I think you still need developers to build that product and maintain it. Lots of developers will talk to you about the reasons why AI might be dangerous for coding and writing bad code and stuff like that. But I won't go into any of that stuff. But what I'm just going to say is you need to know how to use AI and how to use those no-code apps. And I think how they can be useful is for rapid iteration, because you can quickly make changes. You can have a focus group right now that you're interacting with, like you and a couple of other people on a call, and I could share a URL with you guys. You can interact with my app and give me feedback now. I can make changes. And today, I can have a final version of that prototype that has been tested with users and can go into development So that means I'm going to be building a product that users actually want again, and cost. So from a cost standpoint, if you are a small business owner, for instance, and you have very limited resource, like I mentioned earlier, these are really useful tools. That means you don't need an entire user research team or a design team that will go away and create Figma mockups. You can literally do this by yourself on a Friday morning and test that with users and hand that off to a dev team or one developer or number of developers, depending on what you're trying to build. App idea, and it makes its way into production very quickly. So it reduces time to market for critical features. And I think that's where AI becomes really useful. But the temptation there to go, if you really don't know much about product management, there's that temptation to go in and just, I have this app idea, and you just type away and the AI builds stuff for you. And you release that into production. You put that on the iOS store or Play Store, and you get like 10 downloads in like a year, or you get 0 downloads in like 5 years, and nobody actually wants to use it. The only people that will download it are probably like your mom and your friends. But you put something out there that you create a requirement document that is well researched. You've done proper market analysis and you've seen what's out there. You know what people actually want, and then you go ahead and build that product. Then you know you are building something that people actually need. So you can actually try to sell that, put some marketing effort behind that, and you get the desired results.
Yeah. I think that's good. I think that's really important. And, it is difficult if you are running a tech company. The temptation is to want to create lots of products and just see what may resonate, right? As opposed to the old way of doing things. And yet, as you're pointing out, that's basically wasteful, ties up your teams, and you end up with products that are sort of half-baked.
Absolutely. So in terms of costs that would naturally go into having a design team or having a full research team. But then again, you have to remember that the design teams are experts in their field, and they know what to look out for when designing apps or a web app or whatever you're trying to put out there for users. That also as well. You might not need a full design team. If you think about doing the research with users and actually doing the design in Figma or whatever tool you decide to use, you may not need someone to actually go into Figma and create that design, because the AI would be able to do that for you. But I don't think AI is able to. AI is able to. You know what I mean. But you still need the experts to guide you and make sure that you're not just going off into the wind and building stuff that people really don't need. Because there are lots of apps out there. There are lots of no-code apps out there that if you go on the Play Store, you see lots of apps out there that people don't download.
That's so true. We tend to, on the development side, not for sophisticated companies, but even sometimes in their case, if it's cool, we think we want to do it. If it's just looks very boring, even though it might be tremendously functional, companies tend to shy away from that, right? Board of directors want something that's cool. They want something sexy. They want something that, they feel they can get a lot of superficial attention around, when actually what the customer wants is something that just gets that task done, right? That miserable task that they struggle with.
I'll give you an example. So I became a dad recently, and I started to design an app for my wife, really. So when she gets around, she can find baby-friendly spots to breastfeed. So she wants to know if there's a high chair there. She wants to know if they have a baby changing spot there, etc. So I designed it as a product person. I wanted a really nice map view, on the screen, that on the homepage, that just shows out all the locations with all the nice widgets in there. And I tested this with my wife. I said, you know what? Have a look at this. What do you think? There's a search bar right on the top. You type in, so it would give you a list of places nearby, and show you, there's a cafe nearby, they have a baby changing spot there, they have a high chair and whatnot. And then you can click on it, you interact with it, and then it takes you to that location. And she just said, you know what? Why can't this just be a list? So in my mind, I thought a map view would be much nicer. But upon testing this with actual users, they just wanted a list of places, and they wanted to be able to click the list of places with the closest place nearby on the top of that list, and that was it. That was it. The solution was as simple as that, and I was trying to make things a bit more complex because I was trying to build something really cool and sexy and nice, but it wasn't useful. So I could have wasted my time creating a toggle somewhere to toggle to map view, toggle to list view, and people really did not want a map view because when you think about it, your mom is out there and she needs to change her kid. She's not trying to look for a fancy map view. She just wants a list of places nearby, and she should be able to click one on the top and go ahead to change her kid in that place. So it wasn't really practical, but it was a cool idea in my head that I had. So that's just a really good example of how you tend to build features based on aesthetics rather than actual user need.
That's so great. I totally agree with you on that. And the example that you gave really highlights how we tend to get lost in all the fancy stuff and not really think about who's going to use this and what they really need to get out of it, right? What do they actually need to achieve? But we get caught up in the user design and what does it look like and how many bells and whistles can we get on there?
Absolutely. I mean, simple things like I've heard users come to me and say, you know what, isn't it much easier to have checkboxes here rather than drop down menus because I can just click that and move on. So things are as simple as that, but you would want to make things nice and you might prefer a drop down menu, but users just didn't find it useful and they would want radio buttons on there. So yeah, let users tell you what they want is the long and short of what I'm trying to say, rather than you trying to figure out what they want. And I think that's one of the really useful use cases for AI. You're able to do A/B testing and to just show users two versions of the same product and let them tell you which one they prefer, and then just build that. So if it would have taken you months to do that previously, now with AI, you can do that in minutes. In fact, you can have 10 different versions and test it with users, and they can pick the one they want. So yeah, that's how I see AI being useful as a tool these days. And I think very few organizations have actually been able to adopt that. I think they are scared of AI, but I think they need to think of it as a calculator rather than, if you think about the calculator versus a chalkboard or an abacus, So that's essentially what it is. So rather than having to do complex stuff the manual way that you're used to with more things, you just need one person to do that with AI now, and they will do it for you. So yeah.
That's such great advice. I really like that. The idea of creating multiple versions and then let the customer tell you what they want and listen to what they want.
Honestly, it will shock you how many products out there don't get tested with customers. I'll give you an example. I like something that Apple has been doing recently. The iOS 26 out there. I think it's the beta version that is out there now. So they released that in advance and they let people download it and test it and tell them what works and what doesn't work. And most of the feedback that they're getting from that is people are telling them they like the old one. Like they don't need all these new things that you put in there. Like, can you just get rid of all this stuff? Like, why are my buttons looking weird? Like, can I have the old button back and stuff like that?
So true. I just got the new Apple OS as well. And yeah, there's certain things I like and certain things, like you say, that we didn't really need.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've seen that happen so many times, to be honest. I'm a big fan of, I play video games on my PS5 sometimes. So every year, FIFA releases a new version of the game. So FC24 was nice. When they released FC25, they changed something as simple as the formations. So the formation in FC24 let users, give users the flexibility of changing your formation the way you like it. You can move players around in a very non-traditional and non-orthodox way. And people like that. People love customization. They love to be able to set their own formation the way they like it, even if it doesn't make sense. And they took that away in 25, and it was sort of hard-coded. Like you have to use standardized formations. You can't change yours. And if you want to change it, for some reason, it was a bit complex. And everybody I know that has interacted with that feature hates it. So that's a good example of, and now they've created that feature, they've added more complexity into that feature that people did not need. So which means more maintenance for that feature. They'll probably get rid of it in 26, but now they've spent time and development efforts into building something that people actually do not want. And it would have been useful to just get feedback from people, and people would have easily told them, "Nah, we don't need that. Can you just leave the information the way it's been, like what we had previously?" So I think that's another good example of product debt and how really easy it is to. That idea may have come from, and most of the time, in my experience, where product debt comes from is from stakeholders. There are a lot of senior stakeholders that want new features in the product. They come in and they say, "Oh, I want this, I want that." And as a product manager or product owner, I think that's where prioritization comes in. You need to be able to say no. I always like saying no is the hardest part of a product owner or product manager's job, because you can't say yes to every single feature that comes in. And in saying no, you have to do it in a way that makes sense, in a mathematical way. I like to say, which is where goals and your North Star, your product vision comes into play. So if it doesn't align with what we are trying to achieve, then we don't need to do it. It goes down the list, or we don't do it at all. Is what happens. So if you don't push back, you just end up with a bunch of features like the example I've just given you that complicates the user journey that was simple previously. So FIFA has a competitor, right, called PES, right? It's not very popular right now, but because of brand loyalty, people are loyal to that FC 25, 24, etc. There's a risk there. So if it was a highly competitive market, right, that you can choose from, like for instance, Samsung and Apple, an annoying feature can make customers make a decision to stop using your product and move to a competitor's one. So that's how risky it can be. You might not be lucky enough to have brand loyalty and have customers that would stay with you regardless of the number of additional features that you added to your product that make life more difficult for them. But if they can't make a decision, if you think about yourself at a store and how quickly you make a decision to not buy something because they added a buckle that you just did not like, or they added Velcro to the product and you just hate Velcros. So it's that risky if you think about it from a revenue standpoint.
So true. Well, Tobi, thank you so much for sharing so many great insights. I think all of us are using technology to some degree or another, probably more so than we may even realize. And a lot of what you're talking about,
Absolutely.
people can really relate to. And I think it's an interesting conversation, not just for people who are in the tech development space, but also any of us who are developing products who tend to get that runaway train that just keeps developing more and more different features and iterations without ever really thinking about, does the market like this? Are they actually going to buy it? Are they going to keep using it once they buy it? So I think you've brought up some really fantastic points, and I want to thank you so much for being with us today and sharing that.
Happy to be here.
Thanks for being with us here today on A Seat at the Table. If you'd like to see some of the other episodes, head on over to our podcast website at seat.fm. That's SEAT.fm. There's also a link here in the show notes. And if you're thinking that you'd like to be a guest on the show, you'll find information on how to apply there as well. Thanks again for joining us. I'm Jane Singer, and I will see you in the next episode.